Is DRC, and the Democratic Republic of Congo has moved a step closer to what could become one of the most consequential constitutional battles in 2 decades. The country's constitutional court has ruled that a new referendum law is constitutional, removing the final legal hurdle before President Félix Tshisekedi can sign it into law. Supporters say that legislation simply provides long overdue procedures for holding referendums as provided for in the Constitution. But critics argue that it opens the door to constitutional changes that could allow President Tshisekedi to seek a third term beyond 2028, something opponents say that would undermine the constitutional term limits. Now, this issue has already sparked political protests and sharp divisions right across the country. Well, joining us now is Ambassador Francine Muyumba, who's a former senator a member of the Senate of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and also former president of the Pan-African Union, Youth Union. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you, Ambassador.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be in Channel Africa.
Ambassador, what's your immediate reaction to the Constitutional Court's ruling? And does this ruling directly translate to a third-term ambition for the president?
First, to start, Peter, I just want to state that the Constitutional Court is the highest judicial institution in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is in charge of interpreting the Constitution and also setting constitutional disputes. In fact, let me tell you that the current court ruling declaring the law governing the organization of referendum is itself unconstitutional. That is the starting point. And it's a conspiracy against the constitutional order. And also it paves the way to the country's fragmentation. So at this point, we cannot even talk about the president wanting to have a third mandate because the Constitution does not allow him to even think about that. And that is Article 119 of our Constitution. So the court ruled in favor of those in power, and of course, rather than ruling in favor of constitutional constitution, the Constitution itself is principles.
Does that raise concerns about the independence of the Constitutional Court?
Of course, it shows clearly that the court lacks sufficient independence from political power, while during this constitutional debate, the courts need to be as independent as possible and also neutral, and which is also above the political interest. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So the DRC Constitutional Court exists as a legitimate body, as you know, legal institution, but its credibility matters, and this is what we are questioning: its independence as the high court, the highest court. So at this point, we believe that the key issue is not only what the court decides, but whether we believe that this decision was reached freely, impartially, and also according to constitution principles. So the credibility is being questioned here. And this is what we think that the court did not do its work accordingly.
But the government argues that the law only implements constitutional provisions that have existed as far back as 2006 and does not by itself amend the Constitution. So is this just an interpretation of law?
Peter, there is a difference between amending the constitution and changing the constitution. Um, President going beyond the constitutional mandate limits can only happen through a new constitution and not the current one that we are having. So currently also when you go to Article 120, so it's between Article 118, Article 119, and also 120 of the Constitution, which limits the number of mandate of the president. And also during the war, we cannot talk about touching the constitution because the country is not being governed by the Kinshasa regime 100%. So what about the eastern part of the Congo if today we decide to touch the constitution? So that side of Congo, which constitution is going to be used by them? So is Congo going to continue to exist in its 26 provinces? And these are the questions that we are asking. So even talking about constitutional review or changing the constitution during the state of war, it is it's unconstitutional to start by that. And we believe that the highest court, which is the constitutional court, supposed first to protect the constitution. It's not all about deciding on the constitution, interpreting the constitution, or setting constitutional disputes. But we must have a faith in that constitution, constitutional court. The Congolese people need to trust the constitutional court. But at this stage, we see that there's a lot of political influence and interference, and which is really creating problems and so on.
So we've already seen protests and rising political tensions. If President Tshisekedi actually signs this bill, how do you expect opposition and civil society to react? Are you concerned?
Of course, but legally speaking, when it comes to our constitution, the president has 15 days to promulgate the law once it's being transferred to him. And this is Article 140 of our Constitution. And at this point, the 15 days have passed already, and the president's failure to promulgate the law within 15 constitutional days time limit does not prevent the law from taking effect. So the law is deemed, as you know, to have been promulgated by operation of law. So it was done by purpose. It's political, and the president perhaps didn't want to have the pressure from the people when he was going to try even and promulgate that law. So it was done by purpose. So Article 104 provides that the president has to sign or to promulgate that law within 15 days. So when it comes to the demonstrations that just happened recently, as you have mentioned, let me say that the people did not only protest, they were also killed. Opposition leaders were seriously injured and also wounded in these demonstrations, and it's really becoming concerning. It's really becoming a major issue in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So wanting to revise the constitution or to change the constitution, it might pave the way toward the balkanization of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Congo will no longer exist.
So the bill also expands voting rights to Congolese citizens living abroad. And is this something that's widely welcomed, or has it become entangled in the broader political dispute over constitutional reform?
Well, it is right for it is a must for all Congolese to participate, including those in Goma and Bukavu and other parts where the territories are not controlled by the government. So it's an inclusive. It's something that need to include everyone in the process. No Congolese must be left out when it comes to democratic participation. And what we are saying is that this is not even the time we can talk about constitutional change or review, because we need to have first to resolve the problems that we're having. The priority of the country is a national dialogue where people can discuss issues that are dividing the countries at this moment. And later on, maybe think, I'm not saying revising the constitution in itself or changing the constitution is unconstitutional, because the constitution provides itself provisions in terms of its change and also revision. But what we are saying that this is not the moment, and Article 19, 18, 19, and 20 of our Constitution does not allow it.
Why do you think this isn't the moment to be tinkering with the Constitution?
Because the Constitution does not allow it, as I said. And the Constitutional Court, Peter, has to protect the Constitution. And this is one of its role. So we have to rule by we need to respect the rule of law. We need to respect our Constitution. And no one is above the Constitution, including the president, including the Constitutional Court.
Is there a possibility that a third term for President Tshisekedi might be a popular wish?
No way, and no one will accept that.
Okay, and that's where we'll leave it for today.
And Congolese are ready to do all they can in their power to fail any regime that is attempting to touch the Constitution, because this is our last hope. And the Constitution is also the contract between the people and the governing bodies.
Ambassador Muyumba, always great talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and giving us some thoughts on these legal challenges and changes that are on the horizon for the DRC and what they might mean. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter, for having me, and have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Ambassador Francine Muyumba, former senator, member of the Senate of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and former president of the Pan-African Youth Union, talking to us about these constitutional changes that might see, amongst other things, President Félix Tshisekedi seeking a third term.
Zilipendwa na